Ketapu, Walafia, Yunakushe Nakabo. You're tuned into the African Ancestral Jellybird channel, and we're going to keep on pushing our ancestral agenda because the ancestors need to come back into the world, they need to come back. There are lots of things they were working on which we have neglected to work on ourselves, and which we need to continue working on. And we'll find that when we work on our ancestral things that the ancestors were doing, we'll get to help out the blue. And talking about out the blue, I have my blue book, which I'm going to be reading from today, the African Ancestral Manuscript. This is like a ancestral biblical text for us to reconnect to our source, reconnect to the ancestors. Know and learn. Know thyself. Our time is now. We are who we have been waiting for. It's time to self-actualize. We're in the Herukhuti cycle. The last video I talked to you about the story of Herukhuti Ogun and how he was went to Mount Behutet to fight the enemies of Oser and Ra, and found that they weren't external enemies, they were internal. It was a great story. If you didn't hear it, watch my last video. It will have the full story for you. Today we're gonna get into a little story about a great African who has been lied about for a very long time. He has been whitewashed and whiteified to try and make us believe that he wasn't who he was. But we know the regions of Africa north of the Maghreb and Tunisia and Egypt in antiquity were populated by African black people. Only recently were they populated by Arabs, Greeks, Romans, all types of different people. So this great brother was a leader of Carthage, which is contemporary Tunisia. Tunisia, Algeria, those regions are Carthage. And he was the leader of Carthage when Carthage was one of the greatest empires in the world. So let's hear about what he has to say. Before we start the story, we say Il Ow. That's the Sierra Leonean way. Since you're ready, you said Ow. We're going to talk about this brother. His name was Hannibal. Now let's not get it twisted. They got you all twisted up in Hannibal Lecter, Silence of the Lambs. What they try to do is vilify our ancestors and our heroes and sheroes by putting their names in movies and giving them negative characters by playing them and having their name transfixed to a negative character like Hannibal Lecter, the mass murderer killer in Silence of the Lambs. That's not who Hannibal was. Let's find out who he really was. Hannibal Barca. In 219 BCE, Hannibal Barca, perhaps the best known personality in Carthaginian history, seized Sanctum in Spain. Polybius, the Roman historian, reported that this breached the existing treaty and was interpreted by the Romans as a declaration of war. A year later, the Second Punic War commenced. In May of that year, Hannibal raised an armed force of 90,000 men on foot and 12,000 men on horseback. Quite formidable. By the summer, they reached Rhône, that's in France. However, they were now a much reduced force with 50,000 soldiers and 9,000 horsemen and 37 elephants. The key is they had those elephants, those African elephants. Celts and Gauls flocked to his standard. So along the way, he accumulated other people who joined his cause because he was such a righteous person. However, and they reduced their numbers. They increased their numbers. They hated Roman imperial rule and saw the Carthaginian campaign as a way of getting back at the Romans. Hannibal's forces crossed the Alpine passes at the end of the year. The great general was the first to maneuver elephants across the Alps. Think about this. Not only people, but he was able to maneuver elephants to cross the highest peaks in Europe. That's a feat. That in itself is a strategic feat which has never or will never possibly be reenacted. So we got to give props to Hannibal. He's doing what he had to do. Up until this day, he studied in military schools because he was one of the key strategists in terms of his military mind. He knew the art of war and the art of peace. Okay, so his elephants actually climb the Alps mountain. So all you people who are getting lazy and you don't want to go climb that mountain, remember, even an elephant is able to climb it, so you have no excuse. From the north, they marched to Italy. However, penetrating deep into Italian territory, they seized Cannae in 216 BCE, killing 70,000 Roman soldiers. Carthage, on the other hand, lost 5,500 soldiers and 200 horsemen in the same campaign. Next, they marched on Rome, but were unable to breach the walls. They camped there for years. Sir James Fraser, the author of The Golden Bow, wrote Hannibal hung with his dusky army like a storm cloud about to break within sight of the sentinels of Rome. So they were just hanging out outside the walls of Rome, ready to take on the Romans. They had no fear in their hearts. They were Herukhuti. They had cut themselves out of their inner emotions and used that double sword so that they were ready. They were courageous. Courageous, when you think about that term, courageous, if you look at the Latin and the French, cœur means heart, and rage is being in a rage. So courageous. Their heart was in a rage, but it was a peaceful rage. He sent, okay, so what happened next? They were, so they waited for years. The dusky army, like a storm cloud, about to break within the sentinels of Rome. In 215 BCE, he sent 2 officers to Sicily to seduce the local rulers to break the loyalties to Rome. The Romans, however, made inroads. By 210 BCE, they destroyed Carthage's new allies in Sicily, and the following year, Scipio, the Roman general, commanded an invasion of Spain. A year later, the Roman army seized the gold and silver mines of that land, which was the basis of Carthage's wealth. In around 206 BCE, a king of Numidia, an African state to the west of Carthage, changed alliances as Carthage began to lose power. Allying himself with Rome, he persuaded Scipio to bring the war to Africa. Okay, that was Massinissa. We had talked about him before. So he was the one who unfortunately sided with Rome. In 204, Scipio invaded Africa, causing Hannibal and Mago, his brother, to leave Italy and return home. The Romans engaged them in the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE, assisted by 10,000 horsemen, supplied by Numidia. So Numidia really toppled the balance in that war. The Romans triumphed. Scipio had planned for and frustrated Hannibal's secret weapon, the use of elephants. The terms of the peace treaty of 201 BCE were harsh. Carthage was obliged to return lands that once belonged to Numidia. They were forbidden to make war on any people without the consent of Rome. They were also forced to hand over their war elephants and not acquire others. Finally, they were forced to pay a huge reparation of 10,000 talents over 50 years. Following the treaty, Scipio and Carthaginian fleet burnt. It seems like what they imposed as well on Haiti back in the days. They imposed that type of treaty on Haiti. Carthage made some sort of recovery during this period, with Hannibal still at the helm. The business of that city was again as flourishing as it had been. A British historian said, again ships sailed to the coast of Cornwall and Guinea. Again, the streets were lined with workshops of industrious artisans. The archaeological finds support the notion that the city recovered. Carthage even proposed to pay off the reparation due to Rome in 10 years. Romans, however, refused. Eventually, the Romans demanded the Carthaginians hand over Hannibal but instead he fled into exile. In 196 BCE, rather die on his feet than live on his knees. That's key. Before transitioning to the ancestral realm, he left behind a letter declaring, "Let us relieve the Romans from the anxiety they have so long experienced, since they think it tries their patience too much to wait for an old man's death." Hannibal transitioned in 181 BCE, but he was the most brilliant military strategist of his time, and up until today, the most leading-edge military schools worldwide study his strategy of war as a model of brilliance. That was Hannibal. Now his picture is right here. We can clearly see his African features and who he was, a strong black brother king of Carthage, who was not taken by the Romans. Even though he was defeated, he kept his dignity, and he always struggled for the upliftment and liberty of his people in Carthage. There have been many lies told about him, notably some of the racist scholars who, when they seen the coin with his face on it, which is clearly a black African face with protracted lips and a flat nose, they're saying that he, being the great king that he was, instead of putting his own face on his coins, he put the face of one of his elephant riders. Can you imagine? You are the king, and you're going to put one of your servants on your coin to represent your nation. Doesn't make any sense. Anyway, Hannibal Barker, great man, born at the end of April. Now we're going to, it's May 11th. I'd like to give a shout out to my mom Dukes. It's her Earth Day today, my grandmother's birthday. Wonderful woman, Yvette Elizabeth Stevens, who did a great job in nourishing and uplifting and taking care of our family, even when the paternal wasn't around. So we'd like to give her a big shout on her Earth Day and continue going, continue being strong, and continue being a divine woman. Also, we like to help to tell you guys to continue learning about your African ancestors. The ancestors are not in the past. The ancestors are not in the past. The ancestors are with us every day. And the more we know about them, the more we can cultivate our divinity. The more we can uplift ourselves. You know, there's no ancestors in the past. There's ancestors right here with us. The ancestral realm is commingling with the physical realm at all times. And when we peek into the ancestral realm, we also peek into the Akashic records of experiences that could uplift and lighten our lives and the lives of others. So once more, let's connect with our ancestors, Egungun, the Shepsu, you know, the Bosun. Let's connect with them through the African Ancestral Manuscript, the Jellybat channel. The Jellybat comes to tell you that Hannibal was a great leader. He was one of the only people who was able to maneuver a herd of elephants across the highest peaks of the Alps mountains in Europe and was a great general. So give thanks to Hannibal, his memory. Remember that whenever you're faced with adversity, think about how much strategy and how much work it took to get the elephants to cross that mountain. Can you get your own elephants to cross your own mountain in your life? Is it possible? Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. And you need to take the example of Hannibal to encourage you and inspire you to do so. J'aimerais vous dire remercier pour écouter la chaîne du Jellybat. And I thank you for listening to the Jellybat channel. We will be back with more stories. Remember, it's the Herukhuti cycle. Herukhuti is the warrior, not the soldier. And if you want to know the difference, refer back to my last video. Peace and blessings. Have a blessed evening. Odabo, Lala Salama, Hetapu, Kerunefer. Bonne soirée à tous et à toutes. It was a pleasure. Hetapu.